The faint blue light of pre-dawn stretched across the tarmac of Celestial Base Alpha, casting long shadows between the hangars. Rachel Daniels paused at the edge of the maintenance bay, tightening the sleeves of her gray coveralls before stepping into her morning ritual. Her breath formed small clouds in the artificial atmosphere as she began her run around the perimeter of the vast complex. 8 years. 8 years since she'd abandoned her real name. 8 years since she'd traded her flight suit for maintenance coveralls. 8 years since Captain Rachel Hayes had disappeared. The steady rhythm of her boots against the composite surface matched her heartbeat. Controlled, measured, hidden. She ran every morning at 0500 hours, before the pilots emerged from their quarters, before the command staff filled the corridors with their polished insignias and casual disdain. The only witnesses to her daily exercise were the security drones and the occasional early shift technician. As she rounded the eastern edge of the base, Jupiter loomed enormous in the viewport, its swirling storms a reminder of chaos barely contained. Rachel pushed herself harder, the burn in her muscles a welcome distraction from the memories that threatened to surface each morning. The court-martial, the accusations, the 4 pilots who never returned from the Proxima mission. She completed her 5th lap and slowed to a walk, her hand unconsciously reaching for the spot where her squadron badge once rested. Instead, her fingers found only the worn fabric of her technician's uniform, embroidered with her false identity. The name Daniels had become her armor, her penance. "Technician Daniels," the voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to see Sergeant Jake Wilson jogging toward her, his expression a mixture of concern and urgency. "Morning, Sergeant," she replied, quickly composing her features into the neutral mask she'd perfected. Wilson was one of the few people on base who treated the ground crew with genuine respect. He'd been assigned to Alpha just 6 months prior, but had already earned her cautious trust. "Command wants all maintenance personnel in Hangar 7 by ZO700. Wilson matched her pace as she walked toward the shower facilities. "Centurion delegations arriving for the Nova peace talks. Big Brass is making sure everything shines." Rachel nodded, already calculating the extra checks she'd need to perform on her assigned section. "Any special protocols?" "Full diplomatic reception. And," Wilson hesitated, lowering his voice, "they're bringing a new model. Chimera PX-9. Hybrid tech. Part human, part Centurion. First of its kind." Something cold settled in Rachel's stomach. The Chimera program had been theoretical when she'd still worn a pilot's insignia. If they'd finally produced a working model, it meant significant advancements in cross-species engineering. "That's interesting," she managed, keeping her tone professionally detached. "Who's running the demonstration?" "Captain Harrison." Wilson's expression darkened slightly. "Admiral's son." "Of course. Derek Harrison. 3rd-generation military. More connections than skill." Rachel had met his type before, the kind who viewed their position as birthright rather than earned privilege. "Thanks for the heads up," she said, reaching the door to the women's facilities. "See you at 700. Once, alone in the shower, Rachel let the hot water cascade over her cropped hair and tense shoulders. Her fingers traced the faded scar along her collarbone, a souvenir from the mission that had cost her everything. Commander Keller had orchestrated that disaster, but she'd been the one court-martialed, her record classified, her skills buried under accusations of insubordination and recklessness. As she dressed in fresh coveralls, Rachel caught her reflection in the mirror. At 34, her face had hardened, fine lines etching around her eyes. The maintenance uniform hung loosely on her athletic frame, deliberately a size too large to obscure the muscle definition that might betray her fighter pilot past. By 0645, Rachel had completed her primary system checks and was calibrating the magnetic boots used for exterior hull repairs. The specialized equipment required precise adjustment, too weak, and a technician could drift into space, too strong, and the servo motors would burn out mid-repair. Daniels. Major Jennifer Cross appeared beside her workstation, tablet in hand. The operations officer rarely ventured into the maintenance bay. Rachel straightened. Yes, Major. You're being reassigned for the day. Cross handed her the tablet. Captain Harrison requested an experienced technician for the Chimera demonstration. Your name came up. Rachel scanned the orders, a cold sweat breaking across her forehead. Working on the Chimera meant proximity to Harrison, to command staff, to the very people she'd spent 8 years avoiding. There must be more qualified personnel, she began carefully. Your file indicates extensive experience with propulsion systems. Cross studied her with an intensity that made Rachel wonder if the Major knew more than she revealed. The Chimera uses modified versions of the same technology. Understood, Rachel replied, unable to refuse a direct order. When do I report? Immediately. Hangar 3. Cross took back the tablet. One more thing. Daniels. Captain Harrison has specific expectations. Try not to disappoint him. The warning hung in the air as Cross departed, leaving Rachel to gather her tools with shaking hands. Hangar 3 had been transformed. The cavernous space gleamed with fresh paint and polished surfaces. Armed guards stood at attention along the perimeter, while technical staff bustled around the centerpiece, the Chimera PX-9. The spacecraft defied conventional design. Its swept-back wings incorporated Centuran biomechanical elements. The cockpit, featuring an unusual rounded configuration, rather than the traditional angular human approach. The hull shimmered with a material that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Rachel approached cautiously, her trained eye immediately identifying the revolutionary propulsion system. The quantum fusion drive was at least 3 generations beyond anything publicly acknowledged in the fleet. You must be Daniels. She turned to find Captain Derek Harrison observing her. His immaculate uniform adorned with medals she suspected were more inherited than earned. His calculating gaze swept over her coveralls with barely concealed contempt. Yes, Captain. She kept her voice neutral, her posture deliberately submissive. The survival tactic of the overlooked. Become invisible. The Centurions arrive in 90 minutes. I'll be performing a demonstration flight to showcase human piloting capabilities. Harrison circled her slowly. Major Cross informs me you're familiar with the propulsion systems? Basic maintenance only, sir. The lie came easily after years of practice. Harrison's lips curved into something resembling a smile. Excellent. Then you'll have no problem performing a complete pre-flight checklist in the cockpit. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. Sir, cockpit procedures are typically handled by pilots. Yes. His interruption was sharp. But our distinguished guests have expressed interest in seeing how our support personnel contribute to operations. You have 5 minutes to demonstrate the startup sequence. The implication was clear. Harrison expected her to fumble through the procedure, reinforcing the superiority of pilots over maintenance crew, a public humiliation designed to elevate his status at her expense. With respect, Captain, I haven't been briefed on the Chimera's specific protocols. Then I suggest you study quickly. He tossed a manual onto the nearby workbench. The demonstration begins at 0900 hours. You'll be expected to perform the cockpit check while explaining each step to our audience. Harrison leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Unless you feel unqualified? The challenge hung between them. 8 years ago, Rachel would have responded with defiance. Now, she simply nodded. I'll be prepared, sir. See that you are... Harrison turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Daniels? Try not to embarrass the entire human race. As his footsteps faded, Rachel gripped the edge of the workbench, her knuckles whitening. The Chimera's manual lay before her, 500 pages of technical specifications and operating procedures. 90 minutes to absorb enough to appear competent without revealing her expertise. He's an ass. Rachel looked up to find Sergeant Wilson approaching, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to her. "Thanks," she murmured, accepting the steaming cup. "Just doing my job." "No, he's specifically targeting you." Wilson glanced around before continuing quietly. "Word is, Harrison wants to impress his father. The Admiral's attending with the Centurion ambassador, Admiral Bradford." Rachel had served under him during the Proxima campaign, before Commander Keller had sabotaged her squadron. Bradford had been off-world during her court-martial, unable to intervene. "Why me?" she asked, though she suspected the answer. Wilson shrugged. "Maybe your efficiency reports are too good. Threatens his narrative about ground crew incompetence. Or maybe someone had recognized her." The thought sent ice through her veins. "I need to study this," she said, gesturing to the manual. "Good luck." Wilson squeezed her shoulder briefly. "Remember, most of those cockpit jockeys couldn't maintain their own life support systems. You've got nothing to prove." But she did, to herself, if no one else. As Wilson departed, Rachel opened the manual and began scanning the contents. The Chimera's systems were advanced, but followed logical principles. The startup sequence contained 47 steps, each building upon the previous. She'd memorized more complex procedures during her academy training. What concerned her wasn't the technical challenge, but the muscle memory. 8 years of deliberately avoiding cockpits, of training her hands to forget the controls that once felt like extensions of her body. If she performed too well, questions would follow. If she performed poorly, Harrison would achieve his goal of humiliating her and, by extension, all maintenance personnel. "Technician Daniels." Rachel looked up to find Major Cross watching her. "Major," Cross approached, carrying a small case. "Captain Harrison failed to mention you'll need to sign these." She placed a stack of documents on the workbench. Standard waivers for non-pilot personnel entering a classified cockpit. Rachel skimmed the forms, liability releases, security clearances, and curiously, a medical certification. "Medical clearance?" she questioned. Cross's expression remained neutral. "The Chimera's neural interface can trigger vertigo in some individuals. A precaution." Rachel signed the forms, noting that Cross seemed to be observing her with unusual intensity. "Is there something else, Major?" Cross hesitated. "The Centurion delegation includes their chief military strategist, Ambassador Krazak. He specifically requested a demonstration of human training methods." "I understand. I'm not sure you do." Cross lowered her voice. "Krazak was present during the Battle of Proxima." Rachel froze, pen hovering above the final form. Proxima, where 4 pilots had died, where Rachel Hayes had been branded a traitor. "Harrison doesn't know this," Cross continued, "but I thought you should be prepared." The implication hung in the air between them. Cross knew. Somehow, she knew Rachel's true identity. "Thank you for the information, Major," Rachel replied carefully. Cross nodded once, collected the signed forms, and left without another word. Rachel returned to the manual with renewed focus, the stakes suddenly much higher. As she memorized the startup sequence, her mind worked through the implications. If Cross knew her identity, others might as well. The Centurion delegation's arrival could expose her past, or offer an opportunity for vindication. By 0845, personnel began filling the observation area near the Chimera. Rachel watched from her position beside the spacecraft as officers in dress uniforms mingled with technical staff. Harrison stood at the center, gesturing expansively as he described the Chimera's capabilities to an admiring group of junior officers. At 0855, the main hangar doors slid open, revealing the Centurion delegation. The aliens moved with fluid grace, their iridescent exoskeletons catching the light. At their center walked Ambassador Krazak, distinguished by the ceremonial markings across his upper carapace. Beside him strode Admiral Bradford, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the hangar. Rachel ducked her head, focusing on her diagnostic tablet as the delegation approached. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison's amplified voice echoed through the hangar. "Distinguished guests from the Centurion Alliance, welcome to this historic demonstration of the Chimera PX-9, the first joint human-Centurion spacecraft." Polite applause followed. Rachel risked a glance upward. The Centurions had arranged themselves in a semicircle around the Chimera, their compound eyes reflecting the ship's unique hull. Admiral Bradford stood slightly apart, scanning the assembled personnel. "Before I demonstrate the Chimera's capabilities," Harrison continued, "Ambassador Krazak has expressed interest in our comprehensive training program. To illustrate the depth of knowledge even our support staff possess, I've arranged for a maintenance technician to perform a basic cockpit familiarization." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rachel recognized the trap, pilots smirking in anticipation of a technician's humiliation, Centurions watching with clinical curiosity. "Technician Daniels," Harrison called, gesturing her forward. "Please demonstrate the standard pre-flight sequence for our guests." Rachel stepped forward, acutely aware of every eye upon her. Harrison's smile held cruel anticipation as he handed her a communication headset. "The technician will verbalize each step," he explained to the audience, "allowing you to appreciate the thoroughness of our protocols." Rachel climbed the access ladder to the Chimera's cockpit, feeling the weight of observation. As she settled into the pilot's seat, muscle memory threatened to overwhelm her. The contours, the arrangement of controls, different in specifics, but familiar in essence. "Begin when ready, technician," Harrison's voice prompted through the headset, a hint of impatience coloring his tone. Rachel took a deep breath, activating the comm system. "Initiating pre-flight sequence," she stated, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. Her hands moved to the primary power distribution panel, fingers finding the correct configuration without hesitation. Engaging auxiliary power, verifying system integrity. The cockpit hummed to life, displays illuminating in sequence. Rachel narrated each step with clinical precision, deliberately introducing small hesitations to mask her expertise. Through the canopy, she could see Harrison's confident smile beginning to falter as she proceeded without error. "Neural interface calibration," she announced, placing her hands on the biometric sensors. The system would normally require extensive calibration for a new pilot, but Rachel felt the immediate connection. Her neural patterns recognized by the technology designed to accommodate both human and Centurion physiology. A soft chime indicated successful synchronization. Too successful. The interface shouldn't have aligned so perfectly on first contact. "Remarkable!" Ambassador Krazak's translated voice came through the comm system. "The technician displays unexpected aptitude." Harrison's reply was tight. "Basic familiarization only, Ambassador. Now, if Technician Daniels has completed the demonstration, I'll proceed with the actual flight." Rachel should have disengaged. Should have exited the cockpit and returned to the anonymity of the maintenance bay. Instead, her fingers lingered on the controls, a decade of training refusing to relinquish this moment. "All systems show green," she reported, voice steady. "Primary engines initialized and responsive." "That's sufficient. Technician," Harrison cut in sharply, "please vacate the cockpit." Rachel's hand hovered over the disengage switch. 8 years of hiding, of diminishing herself, pressed against her consciousness. The cockpit felt more like home than any quarters she'd occupied since her disgrace. "Technician Daniels," Major Cross's voice replaced Harrison's in her headset. "Complete the sequence." A directive? A test? Rachel couldn't be sure, but Cross's tone carried authority. Harrison lacked. Rachel's decision crystallized in an instant. Her fingers danced across the control surfaces, completing the full pre-flight checklist with the speed and precision of a veteran pilot. "Pre-flight complete," she announced. "Chimera PX-9 ready for departure." Gasps echoed through the hangar as the Chimera's engines cycled to full standby, the distinctive harmonic resonance of quantum fusion filling the space. "Daniels, exit the cockpit immediately!" Harrison's voice had lost all pretense of control. Rachel ignored him, activating the external communications. "Request clearance for demonstration flight." Silence stretched for 3 agonizing seconds before Admiral Bradford's voice responded. "Clearance granted. Chimera PX-9. Proceed with demonstration pattern Alpha." Rachel engaged the repulsors, lifting the spacecraft with gentle precision from the hangar floor. Through the comms, she heard Harrison's protests cut short, presumably by Bradford's intervention. As the Chimera rose toward the hangar's massive doors, Rachel felt a calm certainty replace years of doubt. The neural interface hummed in perfect harmony with her thoughts, the ship responding as if it were an extension of her body. "Commencing demonstration," she announced, guiding the Chimera through the opening and into the stark beauty of space beyond Celestial Base Alpha. Jupiter dominated the view, its swirling storms a canvas for what would follow. Rachel accelerated the Chimera along a standard demonstration trajectory, allowing the observers to appreciate the ship's baseline capabilities. Then, without warning, she banked hard, engaging the quantum drive in a maneuver that should have been impossible at such proximity to the station. G-forces pressed her into the seat as the Chimera sliced through space in a series of precision turns that showcased both the ship's capabilities and the pilot's mastery. Through the neural interface, Rachel sensed the ship's potential beyond its design parameters. She pushed harder, executing a Proxima spiral, a maneuver she'd pioneered during the campaign that had ended her career. The move required split-second timing and intuitive understanding of spatial dynamics that few pilots ever achieved. The Chimera responded flawlessly, cutting through the simulated attack pattern that appeared automatically on her tactical display. Each virtual enemy target disintegrated under her theoretical weapons fire, the combat computer struggling to keep pace with her reactions. "Impossible," someone whispered through the open comm channel. Rachel completed the demonstration with a high-velocity approach to the station, bleeding off speed in a controlled deceleration that brought the Chimera to a perfect hover outside the observation deck. Through the viewport, she could see the assembled crowd staring in disbelief, the Centurions gesturing with evident excitement. "Requesting permission to dock," she transmitted, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Permission granted," came Bradford's immediate response. "Docking Bay 1. Rachel guided the Chimera to the designated bay with precision, born of thousands of flight hours. As the ship settled onto the landing pad, she completed the shutdown sequence and removed the neural interface with practiced ease. For a moment, she remained motionless in the cockpit, savoring what might be her final moments as a pilot. Then, squaring her shoulders, she opened the canopy and descended the access ladder. A crowd had gathered in the docking bay. At its center stood Admiral Bradford, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Ambassador Krazak's posture conveyed what Rachel recognized as Centurion respect. Captain Harrison lingered at the periphery, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. "Technician Daniels," Bradford addressed her formally as she approached. "Or should I say, Captain Hayes?" A collective murmur rippled through the assembled personnel. Rachel stood at attention, neither confirming nor denying her identity. "Ambassador Krazak recognized your flying style immediately," Bradford continued. "The Proxima spiral is quite distinctive, especially to those who witnessed it in combat." Rachel's gaze shifted to the Centurion ambassador, who inclined his upper body in acknowledgement. "The maneuver saved 3 Centurion vessels during the Battle of Proxima," Krazak stated, his translator rendering the clicks and whistles of his native language into flat English. "We had not understood why the human pilot responsible had disappeared from service." Bradford's expression hardened as he turned to address the crowd. 8 years ago, Captain Rachel Hayes was court-martialed for insubordination and recklessness, resulting in the loss of 4 pilots during the Proxima campaign. Evidence suggested she had abandoned formation to pursue personal glory. Rachel felt the weight of judgment descend upon her once more, the familiar shame threatening to crush her resolve. What the court did not know, Bradford continued, was that Commander Jason Keller had altered the mission parameters and communication logs. Captain Hayes broke formation on my direct order, an order Keller deleted from the record. Shock rippled through the gathering. Major Cross stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We recovered the original communications 6 months ago," she announced. Commander Keller's treachery extended beyond falsifying records. He deliberately sabotaged the squadron's support systems, resulting in the 4 casualties blamed on Captain Hayes. "Where is Keller now?" someone called from the crowd. "Under arrest," Bradford replied grimly, "along with 3 other officers implicated in the conspiracy. Their trial begins next month." He turned back to Rachel, his weathered features softening slightly. "Captain Hayes, in light of these revelations, your court-martial has been vacated. Your rank and privileges are hereby restored, effective immediately." The silence that followed felt weightless, suspended between past and future. Rachel had imagined this moment during countless sleepless nights. Vindication, restoration, justice. Yet standing here, she felt strangely detached from the woman who had once craved those things. "Admiral," she began, her voice steady, "I appreciate the correction of the record. However, I cannot accept reinstatement." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the gathering. Bradford's eyebrows rose slightly. "May I ask why, Captain?" Rachel considered her words carefully. "The woman who flew that mission died 8 years ago. The woman standing before you now has different priorities." She turned to face the assembled personnel, including the maintenance crew who had accepted her as one of their own. "For 8 years, I've watched dedicated technicians and support staff maintain this base with minimal recognition. I've seen pilots take credit for victories that wouldn't be possible without the people who keep their ships flying." Her gaze found Harrison, who refused to meet her eyes. "The division between cockpit and ground crew serves no one, especially not in an era of human-centured cooperation." Ambassador Krazak stepped forward. "In our fleet, those who maintain vessels are honored equally with those who pilot them. The division you describe is inefficient." "Precisely," Rachel agreed. "Which is why I'm declining reinstatement as a pilot." She turned back to Bradford. "Instead, I request permission to establish a new training program, one that integrates maintenance expertise with flight operations." Bradford studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Proposal approved. Captain Hayes, you'll have full autonomy to develop the curriculum." "Thank you, Admiral." Rachel reached up and unfastened the flight suit she'd been given for the demonstration. Beneath it, she still wore her maintenance coveralls. "And I prefer Daniels now. Rachel Daniels." The symbolism wasn't lost on those watching. Rachel had chosen her new identity, not as a disguise, but as an evolution. Hayes had been a pilot. Daniels would be something more. As the crowd dispersed, Sergeant Wilson approached, grinning broadly. "That was quite a show. Daniels." "Just doing my job," she replied, echoing her earlier words with new meaning. "So, what happens now?" Rachel glanced toward the Chimera, its unique design a testament to what could be achieved when different perspectives united. "Now," she said, "we build something better." 6 months later, Rachel stood at the observation window of the Europa orbital station, watching a class of cadets practice emergency repairs in the simulation chamber. The Hayes-Daniels Flight Academy, she'd compromised on the name, occupied an entire section of the station, its innovative curriculum attracting top candidates from both human and Centran space forces. "Impressive progress," Admiral Bradford commented, joining her at the window. "Your integration program has reduced maintenance errors by 68%, and improved pilot response times in crisis scenarios. Rachel nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. Turns out, pilots make better decisions when they understand their ships from the inside out. The Centurions have requested we expand the program to their homeworld, Bradford informed her. Ambassador Krazak specifically asked for you to oversee the implementation. I'll consider it, Rachel replied, watching as a cadet successfully completed a complex repair while maintaining flight stability. But my place is here for now. Bradford studied her profile. You could have had any command in the fleet. You know, the Chimera Squadron is still without a leader. Rachel smiled, a genuine expression that still felt somewhat unfamiliar. 8 years ago, that would have been my dream assignment. She gestured toward the training room. This is more important. Through the reinforced glass, she could see her students, former pilots learning maintenance skills, former technicians mastering flight controls, all of them breaking down the artificial barriers that had defined their separate worlds. Captain Harrison requested a transfer to the Jupiter outpost, Bradford mentioned casually. Apparently, the atmosphere here doesn't agree with him. Rachel didn't respond immediately. Harrison's humiliation had been public and complete, but she took no pleasure in it. His failure represented the old system she was working to replace. I hope he finds what he's looking for, she said finally. Bradford nodded, understanding her meaning. Your next class starts in 20 minutes. I won't keep you. As the Admiral departed, Rachel turned her attention back to the training room. On the far wall hung a simple plaque inscribed with the Academy's motto, To fly is to understand. To maintain is to enable. Excellence demands both. 8 years hiding in plain sight had taught Rachel patience and humility. The Chimera incident had given her purpose. Now, watching her cadets, human and Centurion alike, mastering skills once considered beyond their respective domains, she recognized that her greatest achievement wouldn't be recorded in flight logs or combat records. It would live in the integrated teams emerging from her academy, in the dismantling of arbitrary divisions, in the recognition that true excellence transcended traditional boundaries. Rachel Daniels straightened her instructor's uniform, neither pilot's flight suit nor technician's coveralls, but something uniquely her own, and prepared to meet her newest class. Beyond the viewport, Jupiter's storms continued their eternal dance, chaotic yet beautiful in their complexity. Much like life itself, she reflected, the path forward never followed expected trajectories. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from soaring higher than others, but from bringing everyone up together. With that thought, she turned from the window and walked toward the future she was building, one cadet at a time.